Big spenders Birmingham City drop points on the opening day. Rotherham United lose away from home, and Crawley Town shock the punters as all four promoted sides win. Welcome to the League One Lowdown Review episode. Hello, everyone. This is the League One Lowdown from the Deck Podcast Network. I'm Jamie, and alongside me, Sam. Sam, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you, Jamie. How are you?
Yes, not too bad either. It's warm, very, very warm, and I've got a very stuffy room at the minute with my door shut to sort of keep the sound in.
Yeah, we're not allowed any fans
day.
on. Not allowed
No,
any fans on because of the noise. Yeah, so we're just going to sit in the sweltering heat and just hopefully not pass out in the process.
Well, that's it. Yeah, very warm day, but a very good weekend, all things considered, as well, with the League One and all of the EFL kicking off on Saturday. I'm sure Sam's shaking his head already. We'll get to the Leyton Orient game in a little bit. We'll sort of start with what, for my money, is probably the biggest story of the opening round of fixtures in League One, and it's the 1-1 draw for Birmingham. We've got a Reading fan who sent in a question this week. You can send in questions at on the Twitter page X League One Lowdown. And a Reading fan here says Birmingham didn't impress at all on Saturday, and he asked if they were seriously overestimated. So Sam, what do you make to that? Have we all gone over the top on Birmingham?
It's always difficult to say, isn't it? After one match day, I think we can properly answer that question once we're sort of 10 games into the season. Lots of new players. New manager in terms of this is his first managerial job, so he's trying to learn the league as well. I think the second half they were a lot better once they made a couple of substitutions, and that's proven by the match momentum I'm looking at right now. Reading had dominated in the first half, could have had 2 or 3, and then Birmingham completely dominated the second half, nearly over double or triple, in fact, Reading's expected goals as well. So I think it's harsh to say well, obviously I wasn't at the game, but to say that didn't impress, if you look just on statistics, they were a lot better. But I have no doubt that Birmingham will be up there at the end of the season. I think we've got to take into consideration, though, what they've signed at least 13 new players, all for a lot of money. And there's big expectation, and sometimes it just takes a little while just to find their feet. And we can use, like Lincoln, for example, last year, a different sort of situation. You were sort of languishing around mid-table, and all it takes is a run of 6 or 7 games in this league, and you're right up there. So I think it's harsh to say they've been overestimated already. We can probably answer that in if they're still 16th after 10 games, then yeah, they will be.
Definitely. I think that's sort of a theme of the opening day, where you always come out with a lot of talking points, don't you? Because you've spent pre-season, there's never too much to say, and then it's the first real look you get at every team, and it's first impressions count a lot, don't they? But in terms of sort of what you said there, you got to wait a bit, haven't you? Give it 10, 15 games, and we'll see where we are. I mean, the league table, I guess it doesn't really matter until Christmas, does it? You get to the halfway stage, as they say, but it was Birmingham's first League One game in 29 years in front of a sellout crowd, and Reading took the lead before Alfie May got his penalty just before the end of the 90 minutes on his debut. So a good debut for Alfie May, and good from a fantasy league as well. I had him in my EFL fantasy team and on the captain job there. So it was good all round, Alfie May scoring on his debut.
Yeah, you can't ask for any more than a striker scoring on their debut. It's the perfect start for a number 9, isn't it? It takes the pressure off him immediately, especially, I know Charlton are a big club, but going to we're called different stature in club in Birmingham, scoring on your debut is always going to take the pressure off you. And Mark Leonard as well, always impressive in League One, isn't he? So they do have a good group of players. Sariki Dembele was particularly unimpressing, shall we say, being substituted at half-time. Wait to see what happens with him. I don't suspect he'll be a Birmingham player by the end of the window, to be honest. But the core basis of a team, and Ethan Laird, Bielik is still there. So
you mentioned it wasn't one you watched. Obviously, we'll get to the Leyton Orient game, and I was watching on Sky Plus the Lincoln Burton game, which also we'll get to. But looking at the stats, it was a sort of a domination, really. It seemed to read as with 74% possession to 26, and more touches in the box. But in terms of the shots on target, Birmingham only had one more. So they've had the possession, they've had more touches in the Reading area, but they've not converted that into chances, have they?
No, I think sometimes that's the way teams set up as well. If you're sitting in a low block, you could just have all this possession going side to side, trying to break them down. And sometimes it is just a case of, I'd love to see a stat of sideways passes and try and forward passes. I reckon, and most of them are probably side to side, trying to actually break Reading down. And we've got to give Reading credit in all of this as well. A side that's only made, I think, one signing this window, and that player was sent out on loan. So it's the same team as they had last year. And it's still, they've got now 1 year experience. Obviously, Tyler Bindon spent a lot of the summer with New Zealand in the Olympics as well. And they do, to be fair to Reading, they've got some good players. Lewis Wing, Harvey Knibb, Sam Smith. They're all capable League One footballers. So I think we have to give Ruben Sellers and Reading some credit as well in all of this.
Well, I had them in the top half of my predictions, didn't I? So I've had a cracking start there. But we'll move on then to our second game, and it was the game you was at, Sam. So I'll pass over to you on this. Obviously, Leyton Orient 1, Bolton Wanderers 2. What do you make to your opening day for Orient?
I was kind of hoping I wouldn't have to talk about this game today because I'm still a bit annoyed. But Bolton, the game was made on the substitutions in the end. We all know the squad depth that Bolton have. You're bringing off people like you're bringing on Geordie Osei Tutu, you're bringing on Lolos, you're bringing on Victor Adeboyejo, and there was a couple of others that come on as well. But they've got so much talent in their squad. And to be honest, for the first 30 minutes, they dominated the game without really creating anything clear cut. Their goal was a bobble volley from the edge of the box that kind of just evaded absolutely everyone and crept in off the post. But then one of our midfielders, Abiro, dribbled the ball about 30 yards up the pitch, had a shot. And that seemed to spur us into life and give us some sort of belief. For the last 15 minutes of the half, while we didn't create anything clear cut other than the goal, we were the better team, if that makes sense. We had a lot more of the ball and were much more dominant. The second half followed the same story. We were a lot more dominant. We had more chances. We should have led through Charlie Kelman, who did score a really nice goal coming back for his second spell with the club. He forced Baxter into one good save initially. He probably should have taken it a little bit closer and just slotted it under him, but we've got to give the keeper credit again, stood up well. We had Danajai sprint through, who was a good 2-3 yards onside. And the linesman, who was poor all game, gave it offside, which then prompted Wellens to get another booking, which was quite amusing because he knew he was going to get the booking. So he disappeared down the tunnel. So the referees then come over to book him and he's not there. So the referee now won't restart the game until Wellens has come up from the tunnel. So then Wellens gets booked. And then 2 minutes later, Adeboyejo comes on. Our goalkeeper, I've watched this back about 16 times. I'm not going to fully blame the goalkeeper, even though it mainly is his fault, because he's come out to catch it. He's been clattered by two of our players, dropped the ball, and then you can't give Adeboyejo, with his first touch of the ball, an opportunity to slot it in. And then the last kick of the game, as Sky Sports Plus decides to not show the games anymore, Nathan Baxter pulls off one of the saves of the season, going to his right-hand side. His momentum shifting him left as he comes across the goal, and the shot from Kelman's gone across him, and he's got a really big right hand to it. It's a brilliant save. And I thought we were quite hard done by to lose that 2-1. But from my point of view, plenty of positives. And for Bolton to not play your best and still pick up 3 points is ultimately, at the end of the season, what gets you promoted.
Yeah, on a couple of points there, and sort of the goalkeeper, you mentioned the mistake for Adebayo's goal. I'm blaming the goalkeeper, Zach Hemming, but I mean, I understand with your point in terms of sort of the two players clattering into him, but I think if a keeper's caught something, they've just got to keep hold of it. They can't be, unless there's a lot of pressure, and I don't think it was too intensive for him. Yeah,
it was a story of his game, really, because he wasn't really tested except a couple of crosses in the box, but he did flap at he looked a bit nervous, flapped at every single cross. It's his debut. I think it's actually his first game in English football, because he's been in the SPL and the Scottish leagues for the past 3 years. So as long as he doesn't do it again, I'll let him off.
Charlie Kelman obviously scoring. It was his debut, wasn't it? And he was really impressive, I thought, especially the highlights of bits. So we had 2 or 3 chances and probably could have had a couple more, but he's getting in good positions.
Yeah, it was his second debut from the club. He played for us in our promotion season from League Two. Wellens made a a point in his interview saying he really rates Charlie Kelman. He's going into his last year of his contract now at QPR, so Kelman's kind of playing for a contract as well. He was a player he split our fan base because he's a striker that doesn't score goals, but I see all his off the ball work. He runs the channels really well. He's extremely quick, and yes, he's frustrating. He takes 3 or 4 chances to score, but you're never going to get a Harry Kane at our level. And his off the ball work, and you partner him with someone like Dan Ajayi, I think he's the perfect partner. So I'm hoping to see them two score some goals.
And a question coming in as well from Twitter on this one. What position do you think Leyton Orient need to strengthen on? Obviously, you're the expert for that one, but before the transfer window shuts, who do you need?
Ideally, I personally would love a left-back, a natural left-back, because we have Sean Clare to play right-back, Tom James can cover either side, and we have Jaden Sweeney for left-back. And I'm one of the outsiders in our fan base. I don't rate Jaden Sweeney at all, personally. He's very one-footed. Everything's a bit rushed. He'll produce these moments where he puts a good cross in, but they're not consistent enough. His defensive position, I think, is really poor. And I personally would like to see a left back come in. And if we're going to be greedy, if we're going to play with wingers, we need another winger. But we currently aren't playing with wingers. So if we're going to continue with the diamond shape, we're going to need another sort of attacking sort of midfielder, because I don't think George Moncur fits how we want to play anymore. So being greedy, we need 3. Ideally, we need 1 in left back.
Fantastic. And Dion Charge was obviously the other person on the score sheet, as well as Adebayo, and he sort of hit the ground running straight away, hasn't he? He was so good last season, and he's sort of, again, he's another season for him where it looks like he's probably going to have a really good campaign, score upwards 20 goals, and they really need that Bolton if they are going to sort of finish where everyone thinks they are. And he is the man for them, though, isn't he?
Yeah, he should have had 2. He missed an open goal as well when a ball come across the box. But the thing with Bolton is we've never doubted their strikers in terms of scoring goals. Probably, if they played every week, all 3 of them will probably score you 20 goals at this level with the amount of chances they create. My big thing for Bolton from last year was they didn't score enough goals from central midfield. I think they have addressed that with the signing of Lolos. So I think it's just a time to bed him into the sort of the way they play, because obviously play with a deeper midfielder than with 2 wide 8s. So I think it's going to take him a little bit of time, because he's probably used to a bit more of an advanced role with Crawley. So it's a change in style for him, but it'll still allow him to get in the box and do what Lolos does best, arriving late in the box and scoring goals.
Definitely. And our last game before we head to our sort of half-time break is Lincoln's 3-2 win at Burton on opening day. I mean, 20 signings, I think it is, for Burton. They've had this summer. Lincoln have made their fair share as well. And one of those was Tom Bayliss. He impressed. We've got a question of just what do you think to Tom Bayliss's debut? And he was absolutely pulling the strings for Lincoln. He was sort of very creative, a couple of assists I think he got in the end, but every time the ball came to him, it looked like something was going to come of it. He was so sort of like dynamite in that sort of attacking midfield role. And Sam, obviously, he was good last season at Shrewsbury, but it seems like maybe he's going to be an even more important cog in a Lincoln team.
Yeah, I think he was it was really difficult for him last year in a Shrewsbury team that was struggled, shall we say. And he was one player you stood out in that Shrewsbury team as like, yeah, you could probably go and play for a better team in League One. And finding himself at Lincoln City, obviously, I don't know much. I suspect he's the replacement for Mandroyu in terms of that more advanced sort of midfield position. That is a player that I would have loved us to have had a look at as well, creative midfielder. Obviously, got 2 assists on your debut. You can't really ask more than that from a creative midfielder. But it was your centre-back that kind of stole the limelight, wasn't it, in the end?
Yeah, Paddy O'Connor, obviously the captain, 2 goals for him. He equalled his tally from the entirety of last season. And he's the league's top goal scorer. I mean, what a start. I mean, no one saw that one coming, did they? But a couple of headers for him, and he scored 2 of the 5 goals, and all 5 were headers. I mean, it was quite miraculous, really. Every goal seemed to be a cross and it was nodded in. But yeah, Paddy O'Connor, sort of a captain's performance, you'd say, wouldn't he? If, getting 2 important goals in quite a tight 3-2 win. The first one, sort of a cross that was sort of half dealt with and recycled back in by Sean Rowan that he nodded home. And then the third goal, the winning goal, was just a free kick that he got on the end of. The other Lincoln goal was Deriqua on his debut, a diving header at the back post, not something that Lars Sorensen did last season. So like something a bit of a different element maybe. Obviously replacing Sorensen, who's gone off to Huddersfield. But the 2 goals for Burton, I guess on the other side of things, both headers, both from crosses. Billy Bowden got in between 2 defenders, and one of the other questions you've got is sort of Lincoln defended poorly, the statement, and then what is the difference between this and last season? And for me, I think it's probably too simple to say it's Alex Mitchell not being there. But that seems obviously the most obvious thing. First game of the season, it's very early to make those sort of judgments. Burton could be a really good team this season. We don't know. As a new manager, 20 new players, they could sort of turn themselves around and be a really good aerial threat, because that's what seemed to be undoing Lincoln across into the box a couple of times that they struggle to deal with. But yeah, Alex Mitchell missing maybe is at least a little part of that, Sam.
Yeah, I would say so. When you're losing, so you've lost your entire technically right-hand side of your defence. You've lost Mitchell, who play on the right-hand side. You've lost arguably the best wing-back in League One last year in Lasse Sorensen. You've also lost your goalkeeper, which is a big part of it as well, because when you're a defender, a big part of your confidence is having confidence in that your goalkeeper will come out and maybe sweep up sort of things, which Jensen was very good at. You've also...
Yeah, he was very good at coming out for crosses, wasn't he? That's an interesting point.
Yeah. You also got, I think Rothland's been obviously moved into sort of a left centre-half sort of position as of yesterday. Yeah, so you've also changed your left-hand side of your defence as well. So it's all a bit all over the place, so to speak. There's no... If you had the same defence from last year, it's the same sort of structure. And you've also got Ben House up front, who played last year, but he's partnered with Makama. And there's a different way. Pressing always starts from the front, and Skubala is a pressing manager. So if Makama doesn't press at the same time that Joe Taylor would have done, for example, there's gaps in your midfield, because the midfielders then stepped up, then Jackson's coming up, and then there's just gaps for people to play around. And it's going to take a little bit of a time, I think, just to sort of build that sort of press back, because it does take time to build a press, especially if you're a high pressing team. That takes time. If you're a low block team, it's just a bit of organisation and a bit of communication, which is where your big leaders like Jackson at the back would come in, but you're not that type of team. You're a high pressing, high intensity sort of team. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time just to get that right. And you probably need some more legs at the top of the pitch, which may be where sort of Rob Street comes in into it, because he's a pressing type of striker. But then where do the goals come? Because House and Street,
you can't play House and Street, can you? As nice as it would fit for a nice sort of a song, a nice chant, you can't play them both together, because there's no goals there. Sort of.
I'm also kind of concerned about, because Deriqua, for me, I know he scored, but he's nowhere near the same ability as someone like Sorensen. So you've lost that sort of creative edge as well, where Bayliss is a better player than Mandroyu, so you've got more creativity in the middle of the pitch, but you were so dominant in the wide areas last year. You've also lost that. So you could arguably say your team is weaker in certain areas of the pitch than last season, where in the central of the pitch, you're probably as strong as you've been for the past couple of years because of the amount of centre midfielders he's bought.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with that. I think they've definitely lost a bit in defence. They've lost obviously a lot at right wing back, and they have obviously weakened up front. Joe Taylor was sort of the only goal scorer they had last season. Tyler Walker, the replacement that was already there, if that makes sense, is injured again.
Yeah.
So there's sort of nothing new there. And yeah, no, I'd agree that they've obviously improved in midfield. I mean, that midfield is stacked, isn't it? They've got no end of central midfielders. I mean, Hamilton's out injured. McGrandles has obviously got a bit of a knock as well, but you've still got Orahan, McKieran, who's just come in, Jeffries and Bayliss, obviously, and there's a few more in there that just show there's so much depth in midfield. So maybe it is I'm looking forward to going on Saturday. I'm there for the Barnsley game, and obviously we'll talk about that a bit more next week, but I'm looking forward to seeing if they play more centrally, maybe, because they've lost a bit in those wide areas, that maybe they'll play a bit more through the middle and through those creative forces they've added in midfield. It's all well and good watching it on Sky, watching it on the TV, and it turns off 2 minutes into injury time anyway. But you're watching it, and the Burton camera angle was quite low, and you don't think you get a full view. So I'm looking forward to going next week to sort of see if there is something different there, because I think it's interesting that they've seemed to have lost a bit in those wide areas, conceding a few from crosses and not quite creating as much themselves. So, but it's a win, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yes.
And you can't really complain. First day of the season, score 3 goals, even though you conceded 2, you've gone away from home and put 3 in the back of the net. It's still a good day at the office.
Yeah, and set pieces are always a big thing, especially at League One level. They're such a big asset to any team at any level, in fact. And scoring set pieces is always an advantage.
Fantastic. So we'll head to a quick break then, and after we come back, we will discuss the 4 wins for the 4 newly promoted sides. Hello and welcome back to the League One Lowdown here on the Deck Network. We've covered a few of the games there in a little bit of detail, and now we're going to move on to those 4 promoted sides who have all won quite miraculously. And we'll start with perhaps the biggest shock. We've got a question in here. Were Crawley written off too quickly, Sam? What a game!
I think we've all done it again, haven't we? Scott Lindsey is a genius. I know, I'm going to start with Crawley. I think only 3 of the players, so Kelly, Darcy, and Williams, were actually in their their squad for the playoff final last year. So it's a complete overhaul of players. And obviously, Burton have had sort of a similar sort of overhaul in terms of squad. And all of these players in Crawley's team have gone in. They know all their jobs. They've pressed the same way they did last year. They've really entertained the Crawley fans. They've scored 2 goals against a team that arguably should be fighting for the playoffs this year in Blackpool. And they beat a team with probably 10 times the budget of them. And a player that particularly impressed me was Caterna, who came in from Fleetwood. Junior Caterna, the really nippy winger, gets the ball and runs at a defender. And that is, when you're someone like Pennington, who's not exactly the quickest, and that's who he run at all game, who's not the quickest, running into his own box, he don't want to be there. And that's how his goal came about. He just gets the ball onto the outside, runs at him, gets the ball to the outside, has a shot, and it just deflects over the goalkeeper. They rode their luck at times. Blackpool did hit the post with a lovely bit of skill. I think it's from Norburn, flicking it over the midfielder and having a shot from the edge of the box. But we can take nothing away from Crawley Town. It's a mighty effort to beat a team of Blackpool's sort of stature in League One with such a big overhaul of squad. Because Blackpool's team, looking at it, other than Lee Evans, it's the same as it was last year. So there's continuity in that Blackpool team. So they should have known their jobs. But a bit like last year, Blackpool's away form, last year they won 7, drew 4 and lost 12 and picked up 25 points away from home, and they picked up 48 at home. So it's the same sort of problems already arising on match day 1 in terms of they can't seem to perform away from home. And no offence to Crawley, this is a game Blackpool shouldn't have lost. Let's put it that way. If Blackpool was serious about top 6 this year and wanted to put sort of a statement down, this was a game they had to basically not lose. And to be honest, Crawley Town deserved their victory in the end, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm also obviously only going off highlights and sort of stats and that sort of thing, but Crawley looked really good. And I don't think it should be that much of a shock, because they were obviously really good last season, did amazingly to go up, but they've lost so many players, you mentioned yourself, Sam. So I think everyone had wrote them off. We did. I can't exactly sort of distance myself from it. I'd put them rock bottom. But it's signs of life, isn't it? Yes, yeah. It's signs of life at the very least. And it's 3 points on the board that no one expected. Maybe even Crawley fans didn't expect. Sort of playing Blackpool, a team that were there or thereabouts in the playoffs last season. The goal Blackpool scored as well, it was an absolute howler from the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So it's not like Blackpool created too much of their own, and the goal they got was a gift rather than something they created of their own volition. It was Jojo Wallacott who decided to kick the ball at the Blackpool striker running towards him, which is never a good idea. But the away record is still there, isn't it, for Blackpool? Obviously, you mentioned it, how poor they were away from home last season, and it's carried on already, and that is what will stop them getting into the playoffs if they don't put that right, isn't it? Because you can't be only good at home
Mm.
or good at home and sometimes good away. You've got to be consistent to get into the sort of the upper edges of the league, especially this season with the quality that there is in the division. But early signs that those frailties away from home are still there for Blackpool.
Oh, 100%. And there may have been a little bit of complacency from Blackpool as well going into this type of game of seeing a Crawley squad completely decimated from last year. So there may have been that little bit of complacency. I suppose the only positive for Blackpool is that Ashley Fletcher's off the mark already. I mean, his goal scoring record over the past sort of 7 years has been dreadful, other than his spell at Barnsley in League One. So it's always good, as we've said earlier about Alfie May, it's always good for a striker to quickly get off the mark. I think the concerning thing for me is Jordan Rhodes. Obviously, he did score goals last season, but they were all in the first half of the season. He had a bit of like a Devante Cole sort of season. He scored lots of goals in the first half of the season and then kind of disappeared in the second half of the season. And he started obviously really poorly yesterday. He seems to be the kind of striker that feeds off service, isn't he? The old-fashioned number 9. He's in the box. He doesn't do much. Doesn't play. And maybe partnering him with Carl Joseph isn't kind of the best option. Maybe someone like an Ashley Fletcher who will drop in, win flicks, is probably a better strike partner for someone like a Jordan Rhodes. So Critchley's got to find that winning combination and find it fast, because I think if they start slowly, he will be a manager under pressure.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of managers like that in the division, isn't there? They start sort of on the back foot, then I don't think it's going to take long for sort of fingers to be pointed. I know Preston have lost their manager already. I don't think that one is a sort of decision based off their loss to Sheffield United. There's obviously something else going on there, but it's that point still stands, isn't it? That teams can get a bit trigger happy early on in the season, and they've got Stockport next week, Blackpool. Who is a team we'll get on later on, and obviously they won on the opening day, so it's not an easy place to a team to be playing. So we'll move on then to Barnsley, a team you mentioned sort of passing it there. They played on Friday night, lost to Mansfield. It's a big rebuild. I know I mentioned that in our preview show, and that it might take a season for them to get back to where they were, but I still didn't think they'd lose to Mansfield on the opening day.
No, it's actually quite a nice starter for League One. It was quite an entertaining game of football. I thought Mansfield for the first half an hour, outstanding. Pressed really well, very organised, got their 2 chances, and they got Barnsley were alerted first, weren't they, with Bacchus, who scored a disallowed goal from a second phase of a corner. They didn't learn their lesson, and Stephen Quinn pops up with, I mean, there was some pretty good goals this weekend, so you could arguably say that the technique of it was special from a 38-year-old, little swaz on the left foot. And then Lee Gregory. Yes, that is the technical term I am using. And then Lee Gregory doing what Lee Gregory does at 35 years old, putting the ball in the back of the net. Daryl Clark, I thought, fair play to him. He made a bold change. He changed his system after half an hour, bringing off their new signing Gent and sticking on Russell into midfield and going to a back 4. And they were a lot more dominant after that, Barnsley. Connell got a sort of deflected sort of goal. And to be honest, Barnsley dominated the game after that. They had 20 shots in total compared to Mansfield 8, but they only created the one big chance, which is the worry, I suppose. Barnsley really need another striker, because Watters is just not the player if you're trying to get into the top 6.
100%.
Cosgrove, I think Cosgrove can be a goal scorer at this level, but partnered with, again, it's all about partnerships. If they're going to play 2 up front, it's about finding the right partner for someone like Sam Cosgrove. He just feeds the balls into the box. So it's finding the right partner for him. But I think fair play to Daryl Clark. I thought Barnsley were the better team after he made the tactical alterations. So it will be interesting what he does for this weekend in terms of, does he stick with his back 5, or does he go, no, we were a lot better with the 4 and go with the 4. And I think Barnsley fans were quick to point that out on social media as well. They weren't too angry with the 2-1 loss, but they praised Daryl Clark for making such a bold change so early, and they appreciated sort of that a manager was bold enough to make that early change. But let's not take anything away from Mansfield. It's a mightily impressive, especially away from home, performance against a team that were in the playoffs last year, and new signing Bacchus particularly impressed me.
Yeah, I'll take the Mansfield part. And you mentioned Bacchus. He was joint youngest. Him and Caelan Dunn, the only people that were 26 in that starting 11. No one under the age of 26. in that starting 11, a 35-year-old, a 38-year-old, another 35-year-old. It's a very old but a very experienced team. And I think that was sort of the bit that told in the end. They obviously took that early lead. But they hung on, didn't they? As you mentioned, sort of Barnsley fought back a little bit and played better after they made those changes. But Mansfield looked fine. And it was it's a good result for them. Lee Gregory on the score sheet, I'm always happy to see that. I mean, I mentioned him in sort of the pre-season sort of look at things, in that he could be someone who makes a real difference for Mansfield, and he's got that experience. He scores goals, and he's got that goal nice and early to set his account up and running. But yeah, big rebuild needed at Barnsley. But yeah, positive signs, like you said, that they will make those changes.
Yeah, the most annoying thing for me with Mansfield, their right back wears number 9. It winds me up. Yeah. I remember Jordan Bowery when he played for us, and he was a striker that couldn't hit a barn door. So it's probably a good thing Mansfield
moved him, but
shoved him at right back, far away from the goal.
Stay out the way.
He was actually quite solid, to be fair to him, at right back. I remember a player, I think it was Ollie Hawkins, who played for Pompey. He was kind of similar. He was a centre back who would play up front. So he was a striker or a centre half. One week he was up front, one week he was a centre half. It's kind of cool to see players like that. So a striker converted to a right back, but it's just
something a bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not one for the purists, is it? The 1 to 11.
2.
It's not. Yes, definitely. Yeah, fantastic. So a good win there for Mansfield, and one of the other teams obviously promoted automatically was Wrexham. I've never seen so many camera cuts to Ryan Reynolds and McAleny in a 2-minute highlight package on the EFL, the highlight show, obviously on ITV. All 3 goals they cut to them in the crowd. But it was 3-2 to Wrexham against Wycombe. Jack Marriott scored a really lovely goal, actually. One of the goals of the sort of the game week. We'll get to the goal of the game week in our final game we're going to talk about. But definitely a really nice goal. And they scored 3. So it was a surprise to me, maybe, that they conceded 2 as well. Is that a sign to things to come? Maybe that they're going to be a lot of goals in Wrexham games, because they've very good going forward, but I mean, Wycombe's put 2 past them, and they're not the best team going forward in the division. So maybe frailties at the back. It was
speaking of the Wrexham goal, Stephen Fletcher's goal, I also think is worth a mention. A really, really sort of, most strikers would snatch at that sort of opportunity, but he's just taking it into his stride, and it's just so composed into the top corner. I think it was defensive frailties from both teams, from any sort of cross into the box. It was just carnage near enough. The amount of, I know Wycombe had a lot of shots and a very high expected goals, but a lot of them were for the same passage of play, where a shot was blocked, then they had another shot that was blocked, another shot that was blocked. So the stats can
kind of like hit the bar, hit the goalkeeper, hit a centre half. Yeah, it was a real mess.
So the stats in this one, I think, can be mischieving if you're kind of just looking at the stats. I think, like you say, Wrexham are probably going to be one of the league's entertainers this year. They're going to score goals with their firepower.
Box office, you could say.
Yeah, box office. Yeah, I wish they would just stop cutting to Ryan Reynolds. What are they going to do when he's in America? Are they going to have a camera in his house?
On Zoom, yeah.
Yeah. Just here's Ryan.
Cut to a picture of Ryan Reynolds, just someone holding up like Ryan Reynolds, like a face mask or something.
But that's the only thing I don't like about the fascination with their owners. It's like, just concentrate on the foot. They are not playing. Concentrate on the players that are doing it on the pitch for them. I think that's why fans get really annoyed with it, because they're not concentrating on the football team. They're concentrating on the owners upstairs. But for Wycombe, obviously they weren't the most, well, how can I put this? They weren't the most thrilling team to watch last year. They obviously got new owners who we know are very, very rich. To be fair to them, they've not gone and been stupid with their money this summer. They've been quite shrewd with their business. With I think Backinson was the only one to actually make his debut, along with Bishop in goal. They've obviously got Kone up front, who's in his first full season, I believe, at League One level. He looks a bit of a handful up front. Last year, they ended the season really, really well, finishing eventually, I think it was in 10th place, and got to an EFL trophy final. So I was expecting them to hit the ground running, regardless of who they're playing. I didn't expect them to concede 3 and have so much carnage in the back line. Sorry, Hartridge also made his debut, so I've completely butchered that. 3 of their players made their debuts. So maybe there is that still a frailty, a bit like we mentioned with Lincoln. There is a new centre-back, there's a new goalkeeper.
Something to bed in, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to take a little while to bed in, but you can't have that sort of carnage every week from crosses.
Yeah.
Every single cross, a little bit of movement from a striker just cause absolute mayhem, and that quickly needs to be sorted. Whether you slot a midfielder just in front of the back four and you kind of change the way your midfield three are lined up, have just a one sitting six with 2 8s, because the two in front of the Wrexham, the Wycombe back four, they didn't really protect the back four at all. So every second ball was picked up by Wrexham, and eventually that's where most of their goals come from.
Yeah, they created plenty of chances, Wycombe. Obviously, Sam Vokes came on and scored another one of those experienced strikers like Fletcher, like Gregory, getting on the score sheet this weekend. But yeah, they created chances, but maybe just didn't put them away as much as Wrexham had a bit more clinical, really. But positive signs, I guess, for both teams going forward, but negative, sort of disappointing, I guess you'd say, in terms of their defensive output.
Yeah, I think with Wrexham, we've also got to remember that they didn't play George Evans, who played a lot of games at centre-half, who came off the bench. Seb Raven, who they signed, didn't start. He came off the bench. And then Dan Scarr, who's probably their marquee defensive signing, also didn't play. So they've got a lot of players to come into that back five, which may well shore them up, shall we say.
Definitely. And to our final game then, the champions from League Two last season, Stockport County, they won 2-0 on opening day against Gary Monk's Cambridge. And before we get into the game itself, I guess that you have to start with that goal from Louis Barry, the Aston Villa loanee, early on, 5-6 minutes, I think it was, into the game. And he picked up the ball and then just lobbed the keeper from about, 35 yards?
About 30 yards, yeah.
It was a wonderful goal. And yeah, goal of the weekend, a goal of the season contender very early on. But a fantastic goal and, more importantly, a fantastic result for Stockport on opening day.
Oh, 100%. You couldn't ask for probably an easier opposition, to be quite brutally honest as well, in terms of Cambridge. The goal was so Route 1. It was unbelievable. It was long ball from a dive.
It's the nicest Route 1 goal ever.
Nice flick. And the finish, it's delightful. I'm questionable on the goalkeeper because he's not exactly very far off his line. But the way the ball does dip.
He's in no man's land, isn't he? He's not on his line, but he's not out either. He's just sort of on the edge of his 6-yard box, really. And he's like, it's, very odd.
Yeah, but we can't take anything away from the finish. It's special, and arguably, if it doesn't win goal of the season, we're in for a special season of strikes.
Goal of the month, definitely.
Goal of the month's going to be a very interesting competition this month. We've got Stephen Quinn's volley. We've got Louis Barry's. That's probably the two from this match week that spring to my mind, shall we say.
Marriott's will be in there.
Marriott's, the flick from Ollie Palmer, who was rumoured to be leaving because of the amount of striking options. But from Stockport, you've got Adai making his debut, Mingy, Bate, who's their captain, Diamond, Barry. So you've got 5 new first-team players in there. Jaden Fevrier come off the bench, got an assist, caused all kinds of problems for Andrew at left-back. They've got Sam Hughes, who didn't get off the bench, and they've also got so many injuries, Stockport, as well. And especially in the forward areas, you've got Isaac Olufei, who was their top scorer last year. He's out injured. They've got a geezer who they had from, I can't remember, Jack Stretton. He's out injured. Their left back, Ramola, Lewis Travis decided to just kick him in pre-season, so he's out injured. So they've got key players as well, Stockport, out injured. And while I did put them very low in my rankings in 12th, they are my wild card for the playoffs.
Ooh.
I think they've got a really, really good squad, a really balanced squad.
Yeah.
They've got a big man up front. They've got wingers that get the ball and cross it. They've got flair in people like Louis Barry. They've got the tenacity of a midfielder like Lewis Bate. I really, really like Stockport County this season.
Yeah, they've got a really balanced team, haven't they?
100%. And for Cambridge, I don't really know what to suggest. They're going to struggle, I think. I don't think we actually put them to go down, did we, in the end? But
no.
I like the signing of Corey Smith. If you're going off ratings on websites on FootMob, he got a 7.6 and was the only Stockport player to get only Cambridge player to get above a 7. So he is going to be crucial to anything that Cambridge do. It's probably not the best of starts. They did have their one golden opportunity through James Brophy after Corey Dyer just passed the ball to him, trying to build out from the back. But they obviously didn't take their chances. They've got a fairly similar squad to what they had last year. They've still got people like Kachunga and Kai, but they've had their chance at this sort of level, I believe. So it's worrying times for Cambridge, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's important, I guess, on the other side of things, just not to get too ahead of ourselves. It's early doors. They've lost a lot. They've gained a lot in the transfer window. I just think it's a wait and see. But on Cambridge, before I sort of talk up a little bit, Stockport, they're playing Crawley next week, and 2 losses in 2 against 2 promoted sides. As much as that, in the grand scheme of things, won't matter, that it's optically dreadful, and it's a bit of a disaster at the start of the season in terms of the reaction to that and the signs it gives. That they've lost 2 games, if obviously they do lose to Crawley, and Crawley looked very good, as we mentioned. So I don't put it past Crawley at all to beat Cambridge next week. But on Stockport, obviously you mentioned the goalkeeper who was at Crawley last season, Corey Dyer. I mean, he was a revelation at Crawley. He's absolutely fantastic. Last season he was superb. He didn't have tons to do, but everything he did really well. Up front, Wilton with a goal and an assist. He led the line nicely in the absence of their top goal scorer from last season, Louis Barrios, who we mentioned, and Jack Diamond as well, who was at Lincoln a couple of seasons ago. Signed for Crawley last season after his court case. He was proven not guilty. He signed for Carlisle, and he's got another League One move, which is, I guess, obviously good for him that he's managed to maintain himself at League One. And he was very good at Lincoln, so he completed the most dribbles in the match, which is a very useless stat. But it exists. So he's someone that could have a good season for them. And obviously, Barry and Wooten impressed on opening day as well. Yeah, could be a good season for Stockport. Maybe I was a bit harsh in my pre-season predictions, putting them a little bit too low down. But alas, all promoted sides winning. I don't think anyone predicted that. It's a good sign, though, isn't it? I think that it is going to be as competitive as we thought this season.
Yeah, let's hope so. And let's just hope our teams don't actually get dragged into this bottom 4 battle this year, because I don't think I could take.
We're flying in League 2 with our 4-1 win on that against that.
I don't think I could take a relegation battle.
No,
I don't think I could take it.
Definitely not. But before we go, then, we did want to mention our fantasy football teams. Obviously, with the new EFL fantasy leagues that have been created this summer, we've jumped on that. There is a league floating around, a League One lowdown league that Sam set up. I'm sure we can sort of repost that on Twitter, because I think if you join it late, your points will be added from previous weeks, so that shouldn't matter.
I believe so.
And even if it doesn't, it's only been one. But for my team, then, we'll focus on the League One teams. I mentioned Alfie May, obviously, earlier on. He was my captain. He scored. Ethan Orahan was my out there pick. He got me 11 points. I'm not quite sure how. 5 interceptions, I think, maybe is what gave him 11 points. But that is a bit of an avenue. Before I go through the rest of it, maybe the only reason I picked him was sort of just to see what sort of points happens for these.
Yeah.
Because the different rules being you don't have to just score or get an assist to get points. Interceptions, tackles, fouls, that sort of thing. You get points for, against, and even Horan with 11 points. I've sort of proved myself right in that sort of picking someone a bit out there, and maybe that's something to do through the season.
Yeah, I quite like them sort of things, though, because everyone's just not going to have the same type of players. Everyone just has this, like FPL, for example, everyone has a Saka or a Foden or a Palmer. Where this, I quite like games where it's like this. But for my League One players, I had, so out of my 7, 5 were League One players. They all did really badly, other than Paul Piergiani, who got me 7. I had Dan Grimshaw in goal, who got me 1.
I also had Dan Grimshaw in goal, which that didn't go well.
Sean Raggett got me 2.
Yeah, same here.
Rotherham decided to lose to Exeter. Johnson Clark Harris got me 1. And then I had to have an Orient player in there, because that's going to be my rule. Every week I have to have an Orient player. And I picked Dan Ajay, so I picked the wrong striker. He only got me 2. And then my 2 midfielders from League 2, I had Jack Payne and Luke Molyneux as my captain.
Well, Luke Molyneux, that's gone well for him, hasn't it? He obviously scored a brace for us. I mean, obviously not League One. I'm sure the League Two podcast covered it, but that absolute wonder goal from like 30 yards out, like a bullet, was absolutely fantastic from him. Yeah, in terms of my team, obviously I mentioned Durahan and Alfie May. I had Raggett and Grimshaw as well. Obviously didn't do much of anything. Billy Sharp got me a goal. Sammy Smodek's a goal and an assist. And Ampadu in defence got me a few points, but didn't really do very much. I should have picked Struzik because he'd on penalties that I didn't know about.
I had Schmodix, and I saw the team line up and took him out. That went well for me. And I had Dion Charles before I put it Danajai in, so I've done really well. Right. So I've lost 2 goals and an assist this weekend.
Lovely. And if that's something you're interested in, we'll keep that up through the season. I think on sort of Thursday, Friday, the preview podcast, Sam and Callum are going to talk about sort of players maybe to look out for the weekend coming, the second game week. So yeah, do let us know in the comments or on Twitter, X, I guess I should say, if that is something you want more of. We can definitely do more sort of fantasy league content as the season goes on. But finally then, elsewhere, Rotherham United lost 1-0 to Exeter, and Steve Evans threw his toys out of the pram, refusing to shake the Exeter manager's hand. I'm sure you've got a comment for me on that one, Sam.
Yeah, I just put, is anyone actually surprised? No, it's just a knob. It's just a knob.
Definitely. Callum will be loving that one. Stevenage, obviously his former side, beat Shrewsbury 1-0. Bristol Rovers left it late and took all 3 points against Northampton Town. Huddersfield Town impressed. They beat Peterborough United 2-0, and I'm hearing Peterborough were very poor. A friend of mine, sort of a Peterborough fan, said they weren't up to much of anything. And then finally, in the Battle of the Athletics, Charlton beat Wigan by 1-0. So an interesting first week, Sam, and sure, lots more to come as the season goes on. Thanks everyone for listening or watching along on YouTube. Sam, you'll obviously be back alongside Callum for the preview show later on in the week, and I'll be back same time, same place next week for our review episode here on the Dex League One Lowdown.